Our mobile garage talk brought to you by Blue Rub. We're in the home of Tom Miller. I think we have a good story for you guys today about somebody that learned through a lot of analysis and just being such an experienced cyclist about a very life-threatening condition that he's dealing with now. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, thanks so much, Bill. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're excited to be where you are, actually, in your place. I love your artwork, by the way. Looking around, you took me on the nickel tour before we sat down. Some funny coincidences. We both have the same fish, which we saw in your back room.
Yeah.
You have a very interesting passion for telephone booths and payphones, which maybe we'll talk about. But you have this really cool art display back there, and then you have really cool artwork in general. And I guess orange is your color, based on what I'm looking at.
Thank you. Yeah, orange is my favorite color. So
Are you Belgium?
I'm not. But everything that I buy, little things that I buy, tend to be orange. It's not. I don't even think about it. But
how come your bikes aren't orange?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure.
Do you have a lot of orange kits?
I do have some orange kits. And then usually the like knickknacks that I have around the house tend to be orange. Backpacks, all my backpacks are orange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably some psychological reason behind it, but I don't know what it is.
Well, we can dive into that some other day maybe, but I've appreciated our friendship via social media mostly. We got acquainted almost 8-9 years ago now. That's amazing. When I was working at Weir Cyclery and you came into the shop and you needed a bike. And for those that don't know Tom, if he's sitting down, but if he stood up, he would look like Gronkowski, but maybe about 6'6"?
Shade under 6'6".
Yeah, and you're muscular. You look like a tight end, if you ask me. But anyway, you came into the bike shop and you were like desperate for a bike because you were heading out on a trip to Mount Rainier, and you had a cracked frame, I believe. And I found a bike in the back corner that you could take. It was a 60, but you really needed a 62, but you made it work. But talk about that trip real quick to Rainier. What was that like?
So that was
2011, maybe?
I can't even remember when that was. It was somewhere around that time frame, maybe 2011, 2012, and there's a ride around Mount Rainier. So I tend to enjoy endurance rides or distance rides, and that was a kind of a bucket list ride that I wanted to do, and that was I think it was 136 miles maybe, and it was circumnavigating Mount Rainier. It's an organized ride.
Right.
And then so I had a goal that summer. I was going to do that ride and then return a couple of weeks later and then climb Mount Rainier.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and so I did those things. It was fun, but the ride around Mount Rainier. It's a great ride and it's a great experience, but I kind of had an idea before I went out there that every time I turned my head to the right I was going to see Mount Rainier for like 9 hours or something.
Right.
And it turns out you kind of only get a little glimpse of Mount Rainier for maybe 20 minutes during the day.
It's so big. It's like you were too close to it, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's still a really pretty ride and a good experience, but it's not. Things sometimes aren't quite what you think they're going to be.
Right.
But it was a good summer, though.
Yeah, well, I know you ride a lot. I follow you on Strava or whatever. Talk about your style of riding a little bit. How many miles a year do you ride typically?
Typically, so for the last maybe 6 or 7 years, I've been over. That's my cat saying hello. If he's at the screen, I don't know.
Don't knock the phone over.
Don't knock the phone. He can go in the bedroom if
That's
we need
fine.
him to.
We're good.
But I typically last 6 or 7 years I typically ride over 10,000 miles a year. Okay. So I'm somewhere between the 10,000 maybe and 12,000 miles per year.
Right.
And it's a mix between fast group rides that are maybe 30 miles to 50 miles or something.
Right.
And then kind of like longer endurance efforts and longer endurance rides. There's a series that I do every summer that's put on by the Rocky Mountain Cycle Club, and it's called the Triple Crown.
Yep.
And so I've done the Triple Crown. It's a series. To get the Triple Crown, you have to do 3 200-mile events, and they're anywhere from 12,000 feet to 25,000 feet in elevation.
Okay.
And they'll have a menu of maybe like 5 of them, and you pick
self-supported, right?
Exactly, self-supported. In the past, they've had somebody in a pickup truck or a car like stop a few times. So I would say I'd say minimally supported is probably the best word.
Yeah.
This year, because of COVID, they were all self-supported, and that kind of ties into my story about what happened to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, for the last 10 years, I've done that series. So I've done some 200-mile endurance rides, 3 per summer, sometimes 5 per summer, and then the fast-paced group rides as well. So I like both.
Well, Mark Lowe is one of my neighbors, actually.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, and I know was he president of RMCC at one point or something like that? I think he was an officer on some level, but I know he rides huge rides, and I see him out riding around. But so as an example, just for our listeners and watchers, one of the Triple Crowns, if I'm not mistaken, is Denver to Aspen.
Yeah.
Through a different series, and it ends up being a little over 200 miles, right?
Yeah, Denver to Aspen, it depends on the route that you take. So Denver to Aspen is an interesting ride in itself, and that's almost its own story.
Okay.
So the Denver to Aspen has been around, I think, since maybe the mid-'90s or something.
Yeah.
And it was first... To my knowledge, it was first developed as kind of a training ride for folks that were doing Paris-Brest-Paris.
Okay.
And so they would do, Denver to Aspen as kind of a warm-up. And at one time it was a larger deal than it kind of became later. It was they had many riders that would do Denver.
It's almost like a mini triple bypass, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so people would do that, and then it kind of went dormant for a little while, and then Mark Lowe started up he wanted to do a series similar to the one they have in California, which is Triple Crown.
Okay.
And he wanted to do one in Colorado. And so he, kind of, to my knowledge, he selected a few rides. One of them was Denver to Aspen. One of them was the Death Ride down in the San Juans.
Yep.
One of them was Grand Loop, which goes over Trail Ridge Road.
Yep.
And so that was the original, to my knowledge, the original Triple Crown, which started... I don't know, maybe like 2009 in earnest.
Oh, is that? I thought it was around longer than that.
Yeah, and there might have been like folks doing those rides before then, but I think as it's known, the quote unquote Triple Crown, to my knowledge, I think it's been around since about 2009 or so.
Have you done the death ride?
Yeah, that's 6 times.
The whole thing in one day.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought about doing that. What's that like?
That's an incredible ride. Yeah. That's an incredible ride.
How hard is that?
It's a challenging ride. There's probably maybe 16 to 18,000 feet of elevation. I can't remember what it is, and it's
235 miles.
I want to say 220. I forgot. I'm bad about remembering what metrics are.
Yeah.
But it starts really early. So all the Triple Crowns start early.
Right.
Because they want to get you up and over the mountains before the storms come. Or
starts at 3 a.m., doesn't it, or something like that?
I want to say, either 3 or 2.
Barry Sapansky invited me to come do that once, and I chickened out a little bit. I made up something. I had a schedule conflict, but if I have to be super honest, I may have been 50-50 about doing it anyway. But
yeah.
It seems like a pretty daunting task.
That's understandable. I've been doing them a long time, and sometimes I'm kind of 50-50 about that. I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? And especially as you do them over and over and over, you kind of ask yourself, okay, why am I still here? But there's probably some psychological reasons behind that.
Right.
But Death Ride is challenging, and it starts out completely in the dark at 2 a.m. and so you're climbing. I think you do 10,000 feet of climbing maybe in the first 7-8 hours.
Start in Silverton, right?
It depends. So it can either start in Ridgeway, which typically, or sometimes it'll start in Durango, and it depends on kind of the direction that they're going, and they try to change it up year to year.
I thought he started Silverton and then you try to catch up at the end, and I don't know. But anyway, I thought, so because he's like, oh, Bill, you've done Ironman, surely, and I'm like, I think it's a different thing. Well, tell me, before we get into what's we're really here, talk about doing a 200-mile ride. What's it? Ironmans, they're 13, 14, 10, 9 hours, depending on how fast you are, but to me, riding 200, I've ridden. My longest ride is 150 miles, and I rode from Arvada to Winter Park over Trail Ridge Road. And it was tough. Talk about doing even more than that. What's the mentality there?
So.
And physically.
Yeah, to me, I think any endurance athlete, and just for the record, I really consider myself maybe an average athlete, maybe a little above average. Like I'm very well aware of kind of where I stand in the spectrum, and I've had a front row seat to see some really exceptional athletes and cyclists, and so I know what that is, and then I know what I am, and sometimes it's it's hard for me to comprehend some of the things that the pros are doing or some of the really exceptional riders are doing. I can't almost comprehend it. But what I will say is that the distance rides to a large part are my mental exercise, and so it's certainly there's a large physical component to it, as anybody will tell you, but to me it's mental, and to me, it's always a surprise kind of where my mind is going to go during the day, and just for the record, I'm a card carrying introvert, and so like alone time is really valuable to me, and it's kind of how I recharge my batteries. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on long distance rides, I like to let my mind kind of go where it wants to go, and it's always like a real surprise to me where it does go.
So it's meditative almost?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I have I do meditate, on my own, and with a group, right? Yeah. And there's a remarkable similarities between the two, and so it has a lot to do with kind of observing your thoughts and mindfulness without actually owning anything, and so just kind of understanding. And there's a lot of patterns that go on in your mind as you do the events over and over and over again, and you kind of understand where your mind goes. But overall, so there's a big mental aspect of it, but then there's the other parts that I enjoy, which are the camaraderie of it. It's kind of I would describe it as a friendly war of attrition. You're with a lot of friends, and everybody's kind of doing their best, but you recognize that you kind of are what you are. And I'm right now a 220-pound guy, and so I'm going to climb at a certain speed, and that's just the end of it. And so everybody kind of understands that, and so you do the best you can.
So you let Mark go, and then
I let Mark go, and then just say, "Hey, I'll just see you at the end."
Yeah, because he's too fast up the hills.
And a lot of people that learn about the distance riding, they get kind of obsessed with the number maybe, and they kind of get themselves a little bit psyched out about the whole thing. But most of the cyclists I know, and I tell them this, that they could do those rides really, really well. In many cases, far better than I'm doing them. But maybe that's just not kind of on their radar what they want to do.
Well, clearly you must have your nutrition dialed in, because that's super important on those kind of rides, and obviously understanding, the repetitive motions of your bike fit's super critical, and all those sort of things. But physically, there is that point where no matter how mindful you're being, your physical, it's going to come to get you at some point.
Absolutely.
How do you manage the work? So before I let you answer, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from another Ironman was, don't find the work, it'll find you. Yeah. Do you find that to be similar?
I do, and I actually I have a philosophy about it that's based a little bit on. So I'm an MMA fan. Oh. I don't participate in MMA, but I like to watch MMA. Okay. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or BJJ, is a primary component of MMA. And there's a few tenets of BJJ that I find that are helpful.
Do you do that?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I just watch. I'd probably get destroyed if I tried.
But Brazilian, do you do a martial arts of any sort?
I don't.
Okay.
No. And a couple of the tenets is that you're relaxing. Okay, so you're trying not to expend energy if you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. And then you're also borrowing energy. Okay. And so in BJJ, you're borrowing energy from the cage, or from your opponent, or from the mat, okay? And in endurance cycling, in my experience, there's a lot of ways you can borrow energy. You can borrow energy from the people that are around you if they're particularly motivated. You can borrow energy from the scenery. Sometimes I'll listen to music or those types of things.
Maybe a river.
A river, absolutely. And so there's all these... Does that go? Okay, sorry about that. There's all these things that are, I guess, techniques for getting energy during a long distance ride. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I notice you have a Buddha behind you, and maybe that ties into your. I assume that's some part of your practice in yoga, maybe. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with kind of not classifying each emotion that you have. And not saying that that not overreacting, not saying this is pain is bad. I'm doing terrible right now. This is bad. I'm struggling on this hill. This is bad. You just kind of like let those emotions kind of pass and say, okay, this is an experience that I'm having right now. I don't want to put too much weight on it, And so you kind of have to learn to let those things kind of fly by. But I think that, anybody that does endurance athletics, and there's certainly people that do a lot longer distance than I do, they'll have like some type of ingrained mechanisms, right, to deal with these types of things. But you're right. The work's going to find you. I mean, you're gonna, you can't control any of the situations that you're in. It's the old cliche: you control your response to them.
Right. Yeah. I get that. Well, before one more kind of aspect, I'm trying to set up this part of your why we're really here, but people understand you better and who you are.
Oh,
sure. I think that's critical to understanding where you are now.
Sure.
And your past a little bit. But were you, and this I don't know, but were you like a sport athlete, team sport athlete at all? You've got the body to be a football, basketball.
Yeah. So I grew up in the South.
Okay.
In Mobile, Alabama.
Where'd the accent go?
I know.
If you have a couple of beers, does it come out?
If I've been down there, if I go visit down there and I come back, it comes back.
Okay. Mobile, I like Mobile.
And so as a kid, I was a big kid.
Yeah.
And sometimes I say that that I was an athlete before I had the choice to be one.
Right.
And so football kind of found me, because it was one of those obvious things. And so I played football for a long time. I played other team sports too. But I played football for a long time, up until 1 year of college. I played at Southern Mississippi. I was a defensive tackle.
Okay.
And I don't know.
It's big time school, though.
Yeah. And I was like 70 to 80 pounds more than I am now.
Really?
Yeah. So I was a much different body type than I am now.
Okay.
And I talk about football a lot because with my friends, because a lot of people are interested in that experience, right? And I learned a lot from playing football, and I had a lot of people, like the coaches and all those kind of things, teach me a lot of valuable things that I used in my toolbox later in life.
Yeah.
But as an introvert, like I really didn't know what it was like to love a sport until I found cycling. And they're so different. In football, there's a lot of people yelling and screaming and kind of lifting you up, and you're the center of attention for a lot of different reasons, and some of that was a little bit uncomfortable to me,
Yeah.
And cycling, for the most part, the type that I do, is very quiet, and so you're really in your own head, and it's a real, almost like a spiritual endeavor,
I can see that. If you played defensive tackle at Southern Mississippi, you were really good in high school. And because of that, I'm imagining you were almost thrusted leadership upon you.
Sure.
And maybe that was uncomfortable if you were really that introvert. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm always uncomfortable. And also, people will, and I'm not, it's fine whatever I don't want to rain on anybody's parade.
Yeah.
But people will kind of lift you up athletically, maybe beyond what you're capable of. And so there was a lot of people that, maybe thought that I was, a pro, future pro level athlete or those types of things, and I really wasn't. I was kind of ham and egg, I was a big guy. but people will kind of do that.
Sure.
And which is fine.
It's a lot of pressure, though.
It's a lot of pressure, and so now, like, I sometimes think, when people talk about my cycling, if they start to do that, I get uncomfortable, like, almost immediately. Like how it is when people that don't cycle, and they'll know kind of the mileage that I do per year, or the events that I do.
Right.
they'll kind of introduce me as like a pro level or a world class level. So I'm like, I know you've had this experience. I'm like, no, please.
I get that from Ironman. Like, so does a lot of other people, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so it's to me it's night and day.
Yeah. Well, so that's a neat segue, because here you are in front of the camera telling us about these things, which you may or may not be super comfortable with, but you have a story recently that you have a serious medical condition that you really didn't know about. You started to feel earlier this year. You weren't yourself. And you kind of want to share this story, so maybe it helps somebody else that might be having similar symptoms but doesn't even know it.
Absolutely.
So tell us your condition and what exactly it is, and maybe how you learned about it.
Okay, so I have bilateral pulmonary embolisms, which are blood clots in my lungs that are there right now. Okay, and I also have what's called a DVT, which is a deep vein thrombosis. So I have a blood clot in my leg as well, which is behind my knee, in I think my femoral vein, and there's another vein, but there's blood clots behind my leg, and so which are probably like the origins of where my pulmonary embolism came from, the blood clots in my lungs. And so it's a potentially, it can be, if people die from this, it can be fatal.
I've been thinking to throw a clot to your brain, essentially?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of different mechanisms for where the clots can go, and one of them can be, you just, your lungs don't have oxygen, so you can't feed oxygen through your lungs, and so you can just die.
Okay.
But I'm not a medical guy, so I can't say what propensity is to throw a stroke or to throw a heart attack or those types of things. But my experience, people were telling me, is that if they get substantial in size, you can restrict your oxygen. You're not getting any oxygen, so you can die.
Wow.
And it can be instantaneous. One doctor told me that a lot of times he finds out when people have pulmonary embolisms because they show up dead.
Wow.
So
that just sits on top of you right now as a stress. Like
right now, it's something that I'm dealing with, and so I'm on blood thinners right now. There's a standard protocol of when you get diagnosed with PEs, they'll typically put you on blood thinners for 6 months. And while you're on blood thinners, they're trying to diagnose the reasons why you got the clots. Because usually, like, clots are something that are people that are inactive, get them, or I don't know all the different circumstances, but maybe typically it's not athletes that get them.
Right.
But there can be kind of factors that lead to that. But there can also be this kind of resounding "we don't know." And the category is called unprovoked, and so that can be a reason why you get the clots. But also COVID, can lead to clots. Absolutely. And so a lot of the reason that I wanted to participate in the podcast was to share my experience, just in case other folks might have similar experiences, so that they can be aware of maybe some of what the red flags are.
Yeah, we'll talk about those. So, because you ride a lot, as we just discussed.
Yeah.
You monitor yourself. You probably know your heart rate versus your power really well.
Yeah, everything.
You know all of those marks that tell you you're doing this or doing that. When did you start to feel and notice a change?
Okay, so this is a really good point to the story, because I have a hard time pinpointing when it was. But let me back up a little bit and explain kind of what my year looked like, because that ties in a little bit to the story. This year was, or ended up being, the 10th year that I was doing the Triple Crown, and so it consecutively 10 years.
Right.
And so that was a big goal of mine, was to do it for 10 years in a row. And the first part of my year, so the events took place in June, or at least, because of COVID, you could pick when you did them, and so they were unsupported.
Okay.
I decided to do them all early in the summer. So the first part of my year was all training, a lot of training, a lot of prep work, because I really didn't want to leave anything to chance, And I wanted to just have smooth events and just be able to do them without, suffering and killing myself, all those types of things. So I went in, let's say like May and June, I went in really good shape. Probably the best shape I've been in a long time.
Okay.
And so all cylinders are firing, everything's going great. And so I put out a set of schedule to do the events, and they were all solo and they were all unsupported. Okay, so it's 3.
So you're doing a virtual Triple Crown.
Yeah. And it's so you just turn in your Strava and they know. You tell them when you're going to go, sign a release, and you're off.
Okay.
And I did the 3 events within, I want to say, 5 weeks.
Wow. That's big.
It's big, and it was more than I had done in the past. It was certainly closer than I had done them in the past, and it was, for a lot of reasons, I was doing them because that way, sometimes those things can kind of weigh on you, and you kind of want to do them and get them out of the way, and so I was wanting to say, okay, if I can do them, in the first part of the summer, then I can have the rest of the summer and do whatever I want to do, and I don't got to worry about,
Yeah, yeah.
And so I did the first one, and it went okay. I did the second one, and it was out of Grand Junction, and it was in significant heat. So it was parts of it were about 108 degrees.
Oh gosh.
In some of the canyons out there,
Wow.
Dehydrated, had a miserable day, just kind of like just fought it the whole day. Like the ride was fighting me the whole day.
Yeah.
Which is not what I want. Like I don't want that experience. Usually. And then I did the next one. All right. And so let's just say it was the end of June.
Right.
Maybe a couple of weeks after. Towards the end of July or so, I was getting back into my groove and riding on my group rides with all my friends, and I was noticing that I was having a little bit of trouble at threshold. Like I was getting a little bit out of breath where before maybe I wouldn't, or I guess a better way to describe it was I was having a more difficult time recovering from efforts. And so if there was a little bit of a sprint, and a Peloton it's an organism, right? And so it can move, and and so if there was an acceleration, like usually when the acceleration would stop, I could recover pretty quickly, but I was noticing that I was out of breath longer, and I would stay kind of out of breath, and I was like, well, that's interesting, and then there were places on the little group rides, and some of these group rides I've done like literally like 400 times.
Yeah.
And so there were places on them where I was getting dropped where I didn't used to get dropped, like little hills. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting.
Right.
And so this went on maybe the second half of the summer. And so, my wheels were turning, but it wasn't like getting hit with a sledgehammer. Like I could still ride.
Yeah.
And I could still do what I wanted to do. It was only like at the top end, when things were going really fast.
So when your heart rate was 160 maybe.
Yeah.
But when it was 130,
it's fine. I can do what I want to do.
Pushing what you're pushing.
And also like in that time too, I was riding weekend rides, and my favorite thing to do is wake up in the morning and just go ride all day. Like
I've seen it. I've seen your Strava. I get that.
I go where I want to go.
I'm not these wave lanes going over here.
And so I was noticing that I was coming home. Instead of coming home at 4, I was coming home at noon.
Oh.
And
I was done.
I was done. I was like, okay, I think I'm just going to go home and sit on the couch and watch TV. And I was like, that's really unlike me. I don't do that. And so, so my wheels were turning, and I was rationalizing it out, and I was saying that maybe I was heavier this year because I am, and I like to lift weights too, and sometimes I carry more weight than is optimal.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I have like a bronchial issues during the year, and so we had a lot of smoke in the air during the summer, and so I said maybe it's all the smoke in the air, it's impacting my performance.
Yep.
I was also thinking maybe I'm getting older, so I'm 52, and I did all those big events right back to back, and I was like maybe I'm not recovering like I used to recover.
Yep. That would have been my first guess.
Yeah. And so all these things are in your head, and you're saying, okay, maybe it's all these things.
And COVID, maybe?
And COVID, okay. So in the back of my mind, I had heard anecdotally, and through a little bit of research, there was some cardiac damage from some people that have had COVID, some athletes, right?
Yep.
And so I want to say it was in the back of my mind that perhaps that could be it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like I was rationalizing things and I was saying, okay, let's not think about the big scary thing. Let's think about the things that might be obvious.
Right.
You know, okay.
Sure.
So I had become habituated to this level of performance. Okay. So this just became how I was riding.
So you're week after week on the group ride, you just said...
Yeah, so
no.
this is just what I am right now. This is how I ride. I'm going to do my best and just get out there. And I was still doing all the rides. I was still,
Yeah.
I mean, I was still doing 200, 300 miles a week, you know, a lot of it at threshold. I mean, I was doing a lot of riding and coming back and being exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
More than usual.
More than usual, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in mid-September, okay, I had a vacation set up, a cycling vacation set up in Steamboat Springs with Mark Lowe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so Mark, you know, Mark is Rocky Mountain Cycle Club, endurance guy, the guy that started up the Triple Crown, a person that I respect infinitely.
Yep.
And also, and this is really important, is Mark is a mentor to me. So when I got involved in endurance athletics, Mark was one of the guys that was encouraging me, that was teaching me, and so, you know, he really is like a big brother to me. Like he's somebody that I listen to.
And he's a medical guy.
He's a PA.
Yeah.
Yeah, PA at Denver Health.
Yes.
Okay, so Mark and I had a 5-day cycling vacation set up in Steamboat Springs, and it was going to be a bunch of kind of 100 to 130 mile distance rides off-road. Okay.
All off-road, okay.
All off-road, gravel.
On your rodeo?
On my rodeo, on my trail donkey.
Yes. We'll give them a little plug here.
Which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was super excited, okay?
Yep.
But on the way out there, I think Mark and I stopped for lunch, and I hadn't seen Mark in months. Like, I don't know if I'd ridden with Mark in like 4 months, maybe. So he had no perspective of kind of what I was, like how I was riding lately.
Yeah.
Like he knows how I was riding before
Right.
when I was starting to get out of breath. And so I was telling Mark at lunch, I was saying, you know, I'm not quite sure I'm in the same type of shape, you know, da-da-da-da. And he was like, oh, okay, it's no big deal. We're just going to take it easy. And I said, okay, that's fine. And so the first ride that we did, we get to Steamboat, you know, drove there in the morning.
Yep.
Okay, get the bikes out. And if you know Mark, I mean, if you're on a cycling vacation with him, you're going to ride. Okay.
I'm guessing that.
Yeah, you're gonna. There's not going to be much going on, but other than riding, but you're going to ride, and which was fine, you know. And so we get on the bikes the first day, and it was going to be a 70-mile ride with about 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So it's kind of like a warm up.
Yeah.
And it was at tempo, right? Tempo pace. And it was little rollers.
Yep.
And I usually rollers are what I excel at because I'm big.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that's like my world. You know?
Carry the power over the
Yeah.
hill. Yeah.
If the hill is short, I'm good. If
Yeah.
it's long, I'm bad. Okay. And during the ride, I started out pretty well, but then halfway through the ride, I started getting out of breath, and Mark kept looking at me, and towards the end of the ride, he said, "Something's wrong with you. We need to go to the ER."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, first of all, like I don't know of anybody else in the world that I would have listened to if they would have told me to go to the ER.
Yeah.
It's the first day of vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, cycling vacation.
Yeah.
All right, and it's just towards the end of the day, you know, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And Mark is a very interesting guy. Like, first of all, like all endurance athletes are interesting people to meet. They all have kind of like a little bit, quirk maybe.
Right.
Okay, and so so once Mark sets his mind to something, it's very difficult to dissuade him. And so I was offering up these meek excuses. I was saying, you know, I'm smoke in the air, and maybe I'm heavier this year. And he was going, no, something's wrong with you.
Huh.
We need to go to the ER.
Wow.
And so after a little bit of this back and forth, I just I acquiesced, you know, and I said, okay, I'll go to the ER, you know.
Huh.
And I think in the back of my head, I had that COVID heart thing going. Like I kind of thought, okay, maybe something is wrong with me, like really wrong with me. So we get to the ER. Okay, had a quick bite to eat. Get to the ER, and then the doctor came and I explained what was going on, and he ordered a panel of tests, and all the tests that he was ordering were geared towards diagnosing cardio issues.
Right.
Because that's what everybody thought, like including me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And as you know, like it impacts a lot of endurance.
Well, it's happened a lot lately with heart issues. Yeah, totally.
And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of scientific evidence. And I fall into that category, so I'm not fooling myself.
Exactly.
Like I know what I do,
right,
like can be damaging to my heart.
Right.
And by the way, I may take a different path down the road,
right,
regarding what type of riding I do. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mark was with me in the room. Okay. They said, "You want your friend to come back?" And I said, "Yes." And as they're ordering these cardio tests, Mark said, "Also test him for Ddimer, which is a test they use for blood clots, which nobody was thinking."
Yeah, right.
Like nobody was thinking, and so, but Mark.
Interesting.
And so they go back and do the test. And the first thing I'll never forget, they came back in and they said, all your cardio tests are clear, like your heart is good.
Yeah.
And we can't find a thing. And so I looked at Mark and I said, like, I am never coming on vacation with you again. Like that says, you got me an ER, nothing's wrong with me, all this kind of stuff. And then someone else came in, they said, but, your D-dimer's high and you have blood clots.
Wow.
And so I quickly apologized to Mark. I said, "Okay, thank you for saving my life. I'm sorry for the things that I said earlier." And did a CT scan, right? And they found all the clots in my lungs. And so all of a sudden, like when that happens, the situation changes and the severity of it goes like way high because they're worried about the possibility of you dying.
Was there COVID in that? I mean, because did it show? Did it present like potentially COVID? So
here's what's interesting, and I'm glad you used the word present, okay, is that, well, first of all, my COVID tests, they tested for it and it was negative, all right? So which may not mean as much as we think it means, like, right? Okay,
yeah,
so it might not catch everything.
False positives, things like that.
Yeah, and so I had the COVID test and I had a COVID antibody test, and they were both negative. And I'd had COVID antibody maybe a couple of months before, and it was negative as well. And the present thing is, I'm glad you said that because, a lot of people that have pulmonary embolisms, okay, they'll cough up blood. They might have sharp pains in their chest. They might black out, okay. They might have like extreme trouble breathing, all right. If you have a DVT, which it turns out that I have, okay, deep vein thrombosis, I have a clot in my leg behind my knee, okay. Sometimes people have them in their calf, and their calf will get like the size of a football or something like that. So there's all these indicators, okay. I didn't have any of those indicators. Like I presented very atypically.
Yeah.
Now it turns out Mark had seen, years ago, he had seen a teenage girl at Denver Health with PEs that presented similar to me. But in a lot of cases, this isn't the typical presentation, so it was extremely, like, I don't know if subtle is the right word, but it wasn't like everybody knew.
It wasn't obvious.
It wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
And so went to the, immediately on heavy doses of heparin, which is an extreme powerful blood thinner. Moved me to the hospital overnight for observation and those types of things, and then because my oxygen levels were pretty good, I was released. But what was interesting about my oxygen levels is, you could look at my oxygen levels and watch them drop when I talked, much less like exerted myself. And so they were dropping from, I think normal might be 95 or 96% or better, which where mine usually ran.
Right.
And mine were getting down into like the 88 and 87% and 86%. Now, what I think happened is, as athletes, we develop efficiencies of utilizing the oxygen that you do have.
Yep.
And so I was working with lower octane gas, but my engine was able to kind of work with that.
Thus at tempo you felt it, at under tempo you didn't.
Right. And so where other people might have had trouble, kind of walking to the store or something, I was able to go ride 70 miles.
Yeah.
But when I started like climbing little hills, I'd start to kind of notice it. And so, but I struggle to explain like how insidious it was, and how it just gradually increased, and I habituated it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so there's a lot of lessons, I suppose, in this thing. Is one is to if you think something's wrong, go get checked out. And also, call, like if you see someone else, not performing or something, maybe talk to them a little bit about what, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
But the lesson for me is, I was a little bit of a, when it came to like emergency rooms, I think I thought like of an emergency room as a place that you go if you have a knife wound or a heart attack.
Obvious emergency.
Yeah, like you need to go to emergency,
Right.
That's where people go, otherwise. And so now I know that if you need to get checked out, you need to go there immediately, because what would have happened to me, like without a doubt, like first of all, like you can debate whether or not, like I don't know that Mark saved my life,
Right.
Okay, so I maybe not.
Right.
What it doesn't mean I'm not extremely grateful for Mark.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
But what he did without a doubt save, okay, is the progression of this thing to where it could have gotten like far more severe. Maybe not could have, but would have.
I was to say it would have eventually.
It would have.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people have like, I think it's called like a saddle embolism, and so you get like a extremely restrictive oxygen intake. You're hospitalized for a long time. I mean, and some people have operations where you have parts of your lung cut off. There can be, cardio damage because your heart's working overtime to kind of pump the blood through your lungs. So there can be all these implications. And what's amazing to me, and what's really one of the blessings to me about this thing, is that I was planning on coming back from Steamboat and like doubling down on my training, because I thought it was a fitness issue.
Right.
And I was a weight issue. So I was going to diet. I was going to start training more. I was going to start like really kind of hitting it. And if I wouldn't have been stopped in my tracks, like by Mark, all right, I know for certainty that it would have gotten a lot worse.
And something catastrophic could have.
Absolutely. I mean, I could have died.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, like I could have died. Like one of the rides that weekend was, I think Mark said there might have been like 8 or 9 miles of hike-a-bike.
Oh wow.
And it was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So if something would have happened to me, like out there, no cell phone reception, no nothing. Yeah. I mean, I could have very easily been dead.
Yeah. So, okay, so now you're on blood thinner, which is, presumably preventing more clots from happening. What about the clot? Like, they think it could stem from your knee.
Yeah, DVT is usually where it comes from.
Do they take that out?
It starts, and so usually what happens with clots, and I don't want to misspeak because I'm not a medical guy.
Right.
But they'll dissolve naturally.
Dissolve.
They'll typically dissolve like a bruise will dissolve.
Oh, okay.
And so right now I've just got to kind of take it easy, and which is a challenge for me.
Yeah.
But I got to take it easy and let the clots dissolve. And also, there's a standard protocol right now where I'm under thinners for 6 months, right? And there's a lot of background work that's being done medically on me right now to try to understand the mechanism for why the clots happened. And so, I mean, there's some really scary stuff that could be going on in the background. In certain types of cancers, there can be a genetic kind of predisposition to get clots, and so there's a lot of blood work that I'm having done right now to try to understand if it's genetics. Okay. But what's interesting too is that, I'm talking to a lot of doctors, right? And so I talk to the ones that I go to, but I also hear from ones that are in the community.
Yep.
In cycling, and they'll know somebody that knows me, or they'll know me, and they've been reaching out, and it's been wonderful, to have them kind of talk to me. And I tell them all the same things. Is, their data points are like 1,000, 2,000 people that have had this. Okay, so they have this extensive kind of data set. Mm-hmm. All right, I have maybe 6 data points of local cyclists who have had this kind of happen to them. Mm-hmm. All right, so or 5 or 6, and in each of my data points, okay, every one of them has been unprovoked. They haven't determined a reason for the clots.
Interesting.
And so, like, a lot of times I think they find something, but in a lot of cases that they don't. And in my case, like I could be sitting here right now and I could have cancer, but it could also be one of these situations where they may never know what caused it. You know, I actually have I have a theory that the endurance ride that I did that was 108 degrees, right? Extreme dehydration.
Oh, right.
Coupled with kind of a inactivity in the hotel. I was just laying on the bed for a couple of hours, and I drove back to Denver after the event. I have a theory that that might have caused it.
Can clots come from such a pinpoint event like that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think I'm the person to ask, and I don't think it's really well known.
Yeah, interesting though.
But if you kind of think about it a little bit, and you think about athletes having, you know, high hematocrit levels, and so there are a lot of red blood cells, and you think about low resting heart rate, all right, and then you think about dehydration on top of that.
So the blood just gets super thick.
Yeah. And then also the other thing is that I'm shade under 6'6". I'm a real tall guy, which is another kind of, you know, warning. I mean, another red flag maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of the increased vessels
and moving all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
So those things, you know, in my mind, I mean, can all play a part. And I think there's probably some studies that have been done on endurance athletes that get this type of thing. But I really don't know if that's the reason. Like I said, like there could be something scary going on with me like right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel it.
What's your mental makeup right now? Are you feeling? Are you nervous, scared, hopeful, happy? Where are you at in these different emotions?
So it's a great question because it's a okay. There's a lot of up and downs, and so it depends on the day.
Yeah.
All right, and it depends on, you know, like if I'm at the Rocky Mountain Cancer Institute, you know, getting blood work done, you know, I'm not in a very positive mindset. I get scared.
Yeah.
You know, about what could be happening.
Yeah.
Overall, though, I'd say that I feel really grateful that this happened, and maybe that it happened the way that it happened, because, you know, I'm still alive. I can still do the things that I want to do. I'm gonna be able to do the things I want to do, I think, and also, it had this weird effect of it's like clearing an abacus. Okay, it was like all of a sudden, like everything else that I was worried about and that I was kind of like concentrating on was automatically like extremely insignificant. You know, and all of a sudden, like, and things that were really important came into perspective, and it wasn't just things like my health. Okay, like that was obviously one of the big ones that came into perspective.
Right.
But the other thing that came into perspective was the value and the nature of friendship, you know, and what like friends can do for you, and how you need to, you know, have them and listen to them, and you know how friends can save you, literally.
Yeah.
You know, and then also I'll say that, you know, I did have a goal to do 10 of the Triple Crown series, you know, and I did that, and it felt great to do that. But, you know, having an incident like this, like, let me back up. And when I said that I wouldn't describe myself as any type of like pro-like rider, right? Like, I know where I stand. Mm-hmm. Like, I never would have described myself as that, but I probably would have described myself as a durable rider. Yeah. Like as a tough, like a pretty tough rider, like one that, you know, people around me seemed to be, you know, they would have some health issues, and I always just seemed to be just like plowing through everything, and I was just like I kind of felt impervious to a lot of those things, you know, maybe subconsciously impervious, because I'd done it for so long and nothing had manifested itself. Well, then after something like this happens, it's kind of like a big, it's like a speed bump. It's all of a sudden now I'm thinking about, okay, you know, do I need to rethink the type of events that I do? Do I need to rethink what it's doing to my body? Do I need to rethink, you know, how I approach cycling, and maybe take my foot off the gas a little bit, you know? And so, you know, there's a good saying that, you know, I mean, in cycling, really, you can't serve two masters. And so there's the exercise for longevity argument, and I mean, our approach. And then there's the kind of exercise for optimizing your performance approach, which doesn't necessarily lead into longevity, okay, and lifespan.
That's really interesting. You can't please too much.
You can't please, and so at some point,
Yeah.
I mean, just my philosophy, but you might need to choose one of those two things.
Yep.
And so this event or occurrence is making me kind of rethink those things. Now, I love endurance cycling, and I think it's a great pursuit, and I might be able to do it longer, but I'm just in the stage I'm rethinking. But overall, just extremely grateful to have the perspective that I have.
Is it fair to say that maybe you've had an opportunity to explore your humanity?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like you were just a cyclist, now maybe you're a human that cycles?
Yeah, it certainly put it in perspective.
Yeah.
Put it in the right place, I would say.
Yeah.
And also the other thing too is that in maybe, I don't know if this is common amongst athletes who've been at it a long time, but I had developed a lot of bad habits over the course of my cycling career. Like when I started out, I kind of knew the right things to do as far as like hydrating, during rides, and fueling during rides, and maybe I'd learned a little bit about resting, and those types of things. And over the course of the years that I was cycling, a lot of those things kind of went by the wayside, for a variety of reasons. One is that they got habituated out because I wasn't doing them.
So you may not have hydrated as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I got used to feeling kind of how I feel, and I got used to just kind of powering through everything.
Right.
And I can just muscle my way through the
Yep.
the strength of my body,
Athlete your way out of it.
or the strength of my will.
Yep.
Forcing my way through just about any situation. I can name a lot of them that people would look at and they go like, wait a minute, like that's an extreme situation. How'd you make it through? And now, like having an event like this is making me like recalibrate all of those things and say like, wait a minute, I need to refocus on the fundamentals. I need to make sure that that if I do big events that are spaced out properly, that I'm fueling properly, that I'm getting enough rest. And trust me when I say like, those things are challenging for me. Like even now, I mean, even with this perspective, like the idea of resting is it's a difficult concept to me. I think a lot of athletes are kind of like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've really found balance.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And it's really strange to have this type of experience and feel grateful. And trust me when I say that I feel grateful. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, and I'm not happy that I had this happen to me, but I'm grateful for the perspective that it gave me.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can conclude, but I would love to maybe revisit sometime when you learn more, because I think I would not want to be in your shoes exactly, knowing you don't know.
Right.
And that's got to be a bit frustrating, and it just takes time, I guess. And thank goodness that Mark was there as your advocate to really get that blood clot test that wasn't even on the radar, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting that you got to be an advocate for your own healthcare nowadays too.
Absolutely. And just to be aware of all the possibilities that can happen to you.
Yeah. Well, I'm super grateful we had the opportunity to talk, and thanks for allowing this to happen and sharing more about yourself and your story and your life and what you love and the color orange. I'll never think, whenever I see orange, I'm always going to think of Tom Miller. I can promise you that. So
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Well, it's been a real thrill for me. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah.